Now, do you have?
Okay, and now I'm going to do a short trip to go help my son out, unfortunately. So Marjorie is going to go man the ship, and you'll see
Woman the ship.
that women in the ship. And so here we have, here's everything here that you can open up if you want to, and then do share screen once you open them up. And here's an Acrobat. There are these things here.
So that's already there.
That's there. It's right there.
An Acrobat.
Right. So
And the one that we just,
what do you want to start with?
the one that we just scanned,
Yeah, it's right. It's right here.
that one.
Yeah.
Can you
So-
rotate it?
I can once we put it up. I mean, there's just a rotate thing here with this. Okay. But what do you want to do? Which one do you want to start with?
We've done those.
No, you want to start with the go back to the birth chart.
Okay.
Okay.
I have two new pairs of glasses that I'm learning my way around. One pair is bifocals for reading and distance. And now these are new ones for the computer.
Okay. So there you go. You're all set.
So-
I will be quick. So
Be that way.
I will. Okay.
So I'm very sorry about this. I apologize. I don't agree with it. So I really enjoyed our discussion last week. I was kind of surprised by it. And I felt that we kind of stopped in the middle. I don't know if other people felt that way. So I just thought I'd open it up to see if there were any unfinished questions or comments from folks from last week when we were talking about astrology. And I'm really sorry Nancy isn't here with us this week, because I thought it was fascinating that her grandfather was a trained astrologer. And then her mother has studied all kinds of, wonderful spiritual things. And she raised her children in the Steiner School, doing homeschooling with that curriculum. And she's a nurse, a full-time nurse. And she's just gone on for more specialized training to help people kind of bridge the gap between mainstream medicine and a more holistic approach, which I think is wonderful. But if anybody has any questions about Jung or what we touched on last week, I wanted to backtrack a little because I was so pleasantly surprised by what I interpreted as your interest. So if that wasn't the case, then I'm sorry, and we could go on. Tonight we were going to finish up our new content, and we were going to just sort of do a conclusion next week. And tonight we were going to conclude with astrology, and Jung is included in there, and mandalas in general, encompassing labyrinths as well. And so that mandalas are something that I just love as symbols of wholeness and the universe, the self. The symbol for the sun in astrology is this circle with a dot in the center. And that's kind of echoed by the symbol of the entire chart. So this is the conscious self. It's the ego, which is an illusion of the self, but it's the part that just got a message, and here comes Bud.
So while we're waiting for Bud, I do have a question. What did you find as the most interesting aspect of audience questions or on astrology last week?
Well, for me, it was that anybody was asking anything. I was just so pleasantly surprised that people listened and paid attention, and I don't remember anything in particular. One that did strike me was Nancy's question about the green line in the chart that I had up on the screen. And I thought it was just my eyes, that it was a very fine line, so I didn't even see it. It was actually this line in this chart was green. It's a quincunx, which is usually coded green. It's 150 degrees between Jupiter up here and Pluto down here. And there's another one that didn't show in that printout between Mars here and Pluto at the bottom. So you see this kind of wedge, and then there's a line across these two planets up here, that this is Jupiter and that's Mars. So they're united by a sextile, which is 60 degrees. And then they both join to Pluto down here at the bottom. That's my favorite symbol, with the circle floating above the crescent, which is resting on top of the cross. So that's called a yod, which is called a finger of God. And that didn't show up in that printout that I had on the screen. And I had completely forgotten that I had wanted to talk about this. And this is a configuration in Jung's chart. And I'm working with, there are various times available. I'm working with this one, which is 6:52 Greenwich Mean Time, and that's just about sunset. The sun is setting here, and this is the western horizon, even though it's on the right. It's as if you back into the chart when you look at it this way. You're lying flat on your back with your head at the top, and your left hand to the east where the sun rises, and your right hand to the west where the sun sets. So you're lying on the earth with your head up here at the midheaven and your feet down here. This is called the IC because the Latin is imum coli. It means the midnight point of the chart. This is the high noon point of the chart. This is sunrise, and this is sunset. So he was born right at sunset. That's 0 degrees Leo. The sun apparently was at 3 degrees of 0. So that's very close in arc. So I'm going with this time, and this is the software that I'm used to, that I'm just getting use of again. For a long time, I didn't have access to any. And we resurrected a drive that had gotten corrupted, cost a lot of money, and we had to wait to recover it. And then we had to wait to buy it back. And so I'm just working through stages of resurrecting my astrology along with myself, really. So it's a good mirror for me. So last week, I thought it was interesting that Nancy brought up, what is this green line here? And then later I said, oh, that's right. That was half of the yod that I wanted to talk about and completely forgot about. So it's definitely not only my eyes, it's also my brain. It's also my focus. They call it brain fog. So I'm taking a good formula of omega-3s again and getting back to where I hope I was a few weeks ago. I took kind of a back step by not taking the right supplement. But on this other chart that we had up last week, it didn't show the second quincunx. It was somebody else's software, and I don't know why. So to answer Ad's question, for me, that's a good lead-in to what I wanted to talk about was this configuration. This all looks like a bowl of spaghetti. These are all the mathematical relationships between the planets. Astrology isn't so much concerned about the stars as the planets. The planets move, some very slowly, but they all move. And so they change and they form these configurations as they move. in the circle around the Earth is here in the center. We know that it's not accurate, but it's from our point of view. It's a geocentric perspective on purpose, because this is where we live. This is our subjective experience. It doesn't matter what's happening out there objectively. It's from the point of view of the Earth. So we see the sun as one of the quote unquote planets or heavenly bodies that moves around us from our frame of reference. And the moon is this crescent down here. Those are the two lights. But we think of them both as two of the 10 planets that are now included in the 360 degrees that we look at as the sky. And these are the signs, which are really just the backdrop for reference for how to position the planets. We locate the planets. Wait, two people have entered the. Oh, okay. It's Judith and Nancy. Hello, ladies. Welcome back. We're just backtracking a little, as we usually do, reviewing a tiny bit from last week, and there's Bud. Good, we've got a full house.
Marjorie, I'll be off just for a few minutes while I finish dinner, and then I'll join you guys.
Okay. Glad to have you. So,
Hey, Marge, I just want to mention before I forget that just lately it's come to my attention the journey of the universe. Since we human beings are the universe, when we reflect upon the night sky, it's the universe reflecting upon itself.
yes. That's beautiful. And we forget that. It's very easy to forget that because we feel, in some ways above it, I think, or beyond it, or outside it. In some cases, alienated from it. I know I did. I felt exiled from reality, really. And so for me, astrology was very healing to feel that sense of oneness. And that's how it works. It's working on the principle of oneness, of the unity. And as the two astrologers were talking in the video that we watched the first night that we were on the subject, we're not apart from it. We are a part of it. And that's how astrology works. It's not that mysterious. It's because everything is a part of everything else. And these things have been studied and they can be measured. And there is even modern statistical research. There are a lot of databases now. One woman had a lifelong crusade. Her name was Lois Rodden. She came up in the beginning of cleaning up data and the conventions around data. So there are a lot of birth times floating around for Jung. They're all somewhere around here. And people can get very particular. Well, is it 3 degrees from the descendant or really just 1? I say we're not really going to know. This source is supposedly his birth certificate, but birth certificates aren't necessarily accurate either. Somebody would have to do a rectification. With using this time, we have Pluto is at 23 degrees of Taurus, and his IC is 5 degrees later at 28 degrees of Taurus. That's something to work with. That's how you do a rectification. You find events that confirm, was that 5 degrees or 8 degrees? Was this 3 degrees or more? And then you do that around the chart with angles. And I had that done a few years ago by a Canadian astrologer, several years ago. Probably we could say many years ago. And it all proved out. My birth certificate said 9:30, but the rectification said 9:26. And what I did was count the number of degrees from a planet near an angle to an angle. So this is 24 degrees, from 0 degrees Aquarius to 24 degrees Aquarius. We would say something significant probably happened to him at the age of 24. And it's very peculiar, but you can do this. You can work backwards and, correct and get the proper time. So this would be something at the age of 3. I shared a little bit. I had something very significant in my chart, the age of 3. And and so on. This would be 5. I don't know how it works. I'm changing my mind in the last couple of years, learning more from Bart about physics and rethinking synchronicity and rereading Jung. The first time I read him, it was many years ago, I was affected by it. I've been changed by the experience of learning his concepts and absorbing them. And I think I'm at a point where I have to do it all over again. And I never had seen his correspondence with Pauli, the physicist, before Bart and I read that in preparation for the class. I think it's more causal than I've wanted to admit. It's in a more mysterious way. Causality is more mysterious than I thought it was. And I think I see it the most clearly, like in the double slit experiment, where they're sending the photons through the slit, and the behavior changes, whether there's one slit or two slits. Why should photons going through a slit care if there's one or two? We don't know, but they seem to send out some kind of scanning intelligence that is getting the lay of the land, the particles themselves. And then at times they behave like waves, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe waves sometimes behave like particles. They're probably something else that changed their behavior according to various situations. And we're just seeing it as a change in their nature, but it's really a change in their activity or a change in the way we're measuring it. So that's, I'm changing my mind, or it's being changed by new studies that I'm making, new thinking about, how does this work? It shouldn't really. If the universe worked the way we think it does, in a linear way, this should not work. But I've looked at it long enough, closely enough, scientifically enough. I've read enough people who have, really, really examined this, and, like the French statistician Gauquelin, and this woman Lois Rodden, she just raised hell about inaccurate birth times. And she said, you're not talking about anything if you don't have an accurate birth time. So that created a sea change. We've had a cultural shift because of her work. And there's at least, more discussion. But in the past week, I've just looked at several books that have very good arguments for different times for birth, the birth of Carl Jung, somewhere around this time on this date, and in this village in Switzerland. So I thought it was really interesting that Nancy noticed that green line going down here, but that chart didn't show that there was another symmetrical one over here, and that the whole pattern is a yod, and that I had meant to talk about that. So that's part of my handicapped right now. So then when I remembered it, I thought, oh, well, maybe we can backtrack if people are willing. And I can share a chapter that I have read a few times recently. Let me see, where am I up here?
And before we go there, Marjorie, another
Yes.
question related to adjustments. How much should changes in precession affect our thinking on charting?
That's a very deep question. Precession is the movement of the entire sky. Apparently changing our pole star, which, you know, the joke in Shakespeare is as constant as the North Star. That's not constant. It changes about every 2,000 years. And we have a new sign on the ascendant on the spring equinox. And that's what causes the changes in era. Those happen every 2,000 years or so. So there are people who pay a lot of attention to how far has, it's called precession, because it goes in the opposite direction. So we've precessed from, this is the age of Pisces, and here we have Aquarius. So we've gone from Pisces being on the ascendant on the spring equinox to now having Aquarius there. And there are people who do a lot of calculations to correct for that. Once you get to be about 30 years old, that's about the time it takes for Saturn to make a full circle. And that's what we call, you know, astrologically being an adult. Once you get to be about 30 years old, it has changed. Most of the people that I knew do account for that, and you can ask your software to do that. So you can ask for the precessed position, because by the time somebody is 50 or more, it adds up. It's several degrees. So you can use the precessed positions. There's also the question of the sidereal positions. And that's the actual, we have at this point separated the signs from the constellations. They're two different things. The zodiac itself, because of precession, is in a different position from where it was. We don't know when we started this all. We think in the age of Taurus for this iteration of humanity on Earth. We think there have been others. So we went from the age of Taurus is thought to be, you know, coinciding with the age of pyramids. That's a very Taurian kind of theme, building things a layer at a time, a stage at a time, very patiently, methodically, level at a single time. How do you get to the top? You have to build up in stages. That's a Taurian kind of principle. So that was the age of Taurus. The age of Aries was the age of Judaism, and that was the sacrificial ram. The previous age was the bull, and we see that in the bull and the Minotaur, and that the Minotaur in the Labyrinth is an evocation of that era. And I say that that's what the Hebrews were doing when they were wandering in the desert, and they reverted to worshiping a golden calf. It wasn't just idolatry, it was atavism. They were going back to the previous age, they were going back to the previous symbol. And that's why Moses was so upset with them. And he felt they had to wander in the desert for 40 years to have a generation pass so that they could have a whole generation out of slavery. and the pyramids and the Taurian age was very full blown in Egypt, so it was really expressed there in Egypt, and he felt there was too much Egyptian influence, so they needed like a cleansing generation in the desert to move out of the age of Taurus and into the age of Aries. And then the age of Christianity, and I say Buddhism, really corresponded with the age of Pisces. And there you see a lot of the Christian symbolism of the fish is martyrdom, sacrifice, empathy. These are all Piscean themes. With the Buddha, it's unity, oneness, merging. These are all Neptunian or Piscean kinds of themes. Aquarius has to do with technology and equality and the individual. So it's thought that we won't have a person who's so much of an effigy or a model or a personification of the age of Aquarius, that it will be all of us. It will be humanity. So it's known as the age of man, which is colloquial. So it's the age of brotherly love, humanity, equality, liberation. Bleed through was considered to come from the French Revolution and the American Revolution, that those were both precursors really of the technical age of Aquarius. But we really didn't have, there was some in Greece, but we really didn't have the same kind of concept of equality and democracy. So it's still an early concept. It's still an experiment that humanity is still, I think, feeling its way into. And it goes back and forth. We get these waves of resistance and wanting to go back to autocratic expressions of power, and we're seeing a lot of that now. And the hope is to move forward in a more balanced way. And we see a lot of hope of that. I think there's more hope in ways than there has been ever before. For one thing, the internet is a great leveler. For the first time, it's usually the king has the power of all the communications, whether it's horses riding from tower to tower and passing on messages, or smoke signals. Now there's no central hub. Every hub on the internet can transmit. So anybody can set up their own channel if they have the imagination and the concentration to learn the rudiments of transmitting. And it has been incredibly empowering. Common people in the quote unquote third world have been able to reveal holocausts happening, in hidden places in Africa. It can't be gotten away with the same way that it was in the past. So I see it as an opportunity, as a leveling. I think we're having growing pains along the way. We're not there yet, but I think Jung was a prophet of the age of Aquarius. I think Jesus and Buddha were both maybe more avatars of the age of Pisces, having to do with that unconditional love and oneness and unity. So the symbolism was very much alive. And we still don't know this is said to be the waves of water coming out of the urn that the figure of Aquarius is pouring actually into the constellation for Pisces from next door. But it can also be seen as two bolts of lightning and harnessing electricity in different ways. I think there's ideas that the pyramids were built using Kundalini energy somehow to create, levitation, to get those massive pillars up. So I think we'll be relearning, remembering, people like Tesla. He was afraid to even publish most of what he was discovering because it could be used for such terrible weapons. But I think we're capable of so much more, and so much more enlightenment and compassion for all people and all ways of life. I think we're just now coming to understand how much has been lost in the Western conquest of indigenous cultures and what they knew about spirituality and healing. And we're mowing down the rainforest in Peru. It's just full of all these medicinal herbs that we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of. You don't need to process them into a patented pill in a bottle that then ends up poisoning us. There's just so much that can be used for good that the indigenous cultures are the guardians of. And I think we're just beginning to respect that and have humility and compassion for them. And we tend to think of our own native population as extinct. They're not. They're still here. And I think they were brought to the brink of extinction, but they've been working really, really hard to recover the knowledge that was in danger of being lost. And they worked with anthropologists, with white anthropologists, to preserve what could be preserved. Some of it was in coded form. Some of it is still oral and protected and only passed on within the legitimate groups. So it wasn't lost, but I hope we are becoming more open to learning from it, and that they will be more open to sharing it. I don't think they necessarily were always enlightened in everything they did. They had wars too. But I had no idea how populated this continent was until I saw a map. It's almost the exact same lines that we have for our states, that the tribes had across the country, across the entire continent. It wasn't empty. And they had rivers were boundaries. They had defined areas like our states that were fully populated and culturally differentiated, and they traded with each other, and sometimes they were enemies with each other, but it was a way of life that they knew how to live. And it had a lot of sophisticated elements, a lot of tools, a lot of knowledge of foods and medicine that is on the brink of being lost, but not lost. So those are some of the things that I have hope for the age of Aquarius, that we will reach to that potential of sharing and equality and democracy. I think it's still a vision. I don't think we've achieved it, and I think it's in jeopardy now. But I think if you take a longer view, we've been evolving toward it for quite some time, and we're just at the beginning. Did I answer your question, Ed? It was a good question about precession.
You certainly did. I was on mute. Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, so there are a lot of people who pay attention to that. There's 30 degrees for each sign. 30 of the 12 signs make 360 degrees of a circle, or approximately the cycle of a year. It used to be 28 days times 13 moons, 13 lunar cycles. That's a lot closer. That's 364. So we think there were 13 signs that the sort of, in Roman and Greek times were Dewey Decimal into this kind of symmetry of 12. But they're more arbitrary than the planets. The planets are more really objectively existent out there. The planets have physical form. It's thought that they affect the sunspot activity on the surface of the sun. The magna on the sun responds to the gravitational pull of the planets moving in their orbits, and then the way their magnetic fields interact with each other when they get at various distances. These lines all represent angles. So this star shape here is a sextile. That means there's roughly 60 degrees between here. This is Mars and Sagittarius. That's roughly 60 degrees from 21 to 24. It skips a sign, goes to the next sign of Aquarius. That's Saturn at 24 degrees Aquarius. He has a lot of these sextiles. He almost has a perfect star around his chart. That tends to mean a lot of talents. See, here's another one. He's just loaded with sextiles. So that every 60 degrees, there's the energy between those planets is in that mathematical vibration, that pattern of vibration with each other. And it seems to be in correspondence with the Platonic fundamental shapes and sacred geometry. So this, as I said, is this wedge here, this triangle is said to be a yod. It's called a yod, Y-O-D, from the Hebrew. And when a person has one, they're often marked in some way as very unusual. And they usually have some kind of a real turning point in their own life, and it can create a turning point in the collective as well. So I would say that that was the case for Jung. And I wanted to share some of the passage from this book. Now, is this backwards or can you see it? It's the odd book. So I'm going to see if I can get down here. I'm going to pull some of this up. Now, all right, you tell me. So I was going to share some of this. Where is the rotate thing? Shouldn't that be up here? Here's view. Rotate view. I'm going to try counterclockwise, and that did it. So let me see if okay. So does that help you all? And we'll send this to you. So this is one of my beloved Jungian astrologers, not Liz Green, but she teaches with Liz Green in her school in London. Her name is Karen Hammaker Zondag, and she's Dutch. And a lot of her books, they're usually written, she seems to be bilingual, but they translate them anyway. Written initially in German and or Dutch, and then translated into English. And so she's one of the few other Jungian astrologers out there. And here she's broken out, she's zeroed in on this yod that we're talking about. And so I used the time that she used. Oops, and this page is upside down. Well, we'll just spin that around. Okay, so
Marjorie, are we supposed to see something different other than his chart?
yes, let me make sure I'm screen sharing. Thank you. Here's Bart, yay. Just in time
For what?
to help me share this screen now. So do I
So-
have to stop the old share? Do I have
Yeah,
to do
yeah,
a new
you-
share?
Yeah, you have to stop,
Okay.
go,
and now-
go, stop share.
and now
You
do
didn't
this
stop
one.
share, it's still sharing.
So this one,
Yeah,
where do I stop it?
up there, it says stop share.
Okay,
Okay, now go to share screen. Click on none of there
okay, and now get
Click on that.
this up here
and then share.
and share. Okay, well, thank goodness you came. Just when you did. Did he have the money?
Yeah.
He did? Okay, good. So we're just finished talking about, well, not finished, but introducing his chart with the yod, and Nancy is here. And Ad asked a really good question about precession. And so this is her simplified diagram of the yod that we're talking about. So it involves Mars, Jupiter, and Pluto. And the other thing that she is focusing on in this chapter is what she calls singletons. And that's when you have one planet. Some people have a true singleton is a planet that is not aspected by any other planet. We're getting Judith in the room. And so this is a I forget what she's calling it. It's a dual is two planets that aren't aspected by any other planet. So there might be some reference to something about that. So for him, it's the Sun and Neptune. And I say that gives him a kind of a profoundly religious orientation, deeper even than he came from a long line of Protestant missionaries and ministers. But his view was a lot more mystic, even as a child. And something that Bart and I are learning about the interaction of our two charts is that we both have Jupiter conjunct each other's Neptune. So the conjunction goes two ways like this. Jupiter is the more conventional religious expression of the energy, and Neptune is the more mystical sense of oneness and empathy and merging. So for Bart and I are becoming more mystical and more kind of alienated even from our unconventional Unitarian background, because we're wanting more mysticism. And that's how I felt as a child, you know. So maybe since you can really see and read, would you read a few of these paragraphs?
So Jung was born into a family of preachers and doctors on his mother's side. There were 6 preachers, and in addition, his father, plus 2 of his father's brothers, were also preachers. His grandfather in his day had been a very well-known and highly esteemed and progressive doctor who was also the president of the University of Basel in Switzerland. This doctor had the local general hospital enlarged and founded a residence for those with mental disabilities. Jung had a yacht comprised of Pluto in Taurus, Mars in Capricorn, and Jupiter in Libra, plus
A duet.
a duet between the sun and the
And Neptune.
and Neptune. 5 of the 10 planets in his horoscope are directly involved in themes that have been at play for generations. In his adult life would have been religious issues, Jupiter and Neptune, his career as a doctor, Jupiter, and delving into the dynamics of the psyche, Pluto, that would not only preoccupy him the most, but would make him famous in the end, which made him famous in the end and drive him in this entirely personal direction. So nothing was sure for him, and his life, as we may expect from a yod and the duet, was completely ruled by his seeking. Okay.
I'm just going to make it a little larger. See if that helps. No. I don't know why I can't just do it a little bit.
Yeah, you called.
Can you help me zoom this in?
Okay, I don't have the code. So you have to go get it, okay?
Marjorie, I'd like to ask a question. I think it would
Sure.
help me. I think it would help me if I understood the definition of a yod.
Okay. It's that wedge shape. It's a configuration. So
It's a triangle.
I'm just trying to blow this up.
Were there certain degrees about that triangle? Is it some special type of triangle?
Yes. Can you help me blow the page up and get off the phone with Emil? Do one or the other. I'm sorry.
There isn't any.
It says Zoom.
Try, oh, I was gonna say, well, see what happens with actual size, and then you can use the control.
There should be a way to just click and
Yes.
So you could try control plus or control minus, and it'll go one direction or the other, and then you should be able to
yeah, okay,
expand.
that's a little better.
There
Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. Okay,
You
now
need-
how do I get rid of this? Go away. And we're gonna move this over here. And do this. Okay, now I can kind of see.
There
Okay.
we go.
Yay.
There we go.
Okay. Hopefully you guys can too.
So,
Yeah, it's much
so
better.
to answer Barbara's point,
let's go-
it's
let's
go
go
back to the,
here.
go back up, go back
You
up
can
there.
do the plus as well now.
Yeah. Well, she was asking about this,
What is the yod?
it's this triangle, which is a sextile, which is 60 degrees between Mars at this point and Jupiter at this point, and they are each 150 degrees from Pluto at the bottom end of this. Would you call this an isosceles triangle?
Yeah,
That narrow wedge.
And Marjorie, a yod can be those dimensions between any group of planets. Does not have to be those specific 3.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, it's the degrees, the 60 plus the 2 150s that make a yod.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it could also be an angle, which this AS indicates the ascendant. That's an angle. And the midheaven here, this MC, you can see the houses scrunch. They're not consistent. They're not 30 degrees apiece. Some are squeezed and some are larger. And that's because of the distortion as you get from the equator. It's a mathematical thing.
Mhm.
So this is pretty far north in Switzerland. There's different house systems as well. So here, a lot of astrology books will tell you she's using the Placidus houses, which do tend to distort a lot toward the poles. I was converted to using something called Koch houses, Koch, which distort less as you get further away. But as long as somebody tells you what they're doing and gives you the data, she's giving you the latitude and longitude here, at least you can duplicate it and maybe make your own adjustments as well. So that's considered good form. That's part of the protocol that astrologers have been developing over the years. But yes, a yod can be between any 3 planets. We have, in addition to points like the ascendant or the midheaven, that's a point that's called the part of fortune. That's just something to do with the path of the sun and the moon. You know, I won't go into any more detail than that. This is the north node. That's another lunar phenomenon that is measured and used in charts. That's used a lot in Hindu charts, the north and the south node. That's said to have a lot to do with karma, with your past lives and your future orientation. So, you know, that could be very important. There are people with multiple yods. I'm getting to know an astrologer. She's about my age now, locally. It's a treat for me. I haven't had an astro buddy in a long time. I haven't seen her chart yet. We're both being kind of shy about that, but she has told me that she has 3 of them. So that would be considered really difficult. That would be really challenging. So it's a configuration of planets or points in a chart. You can have a grand trine. That's an equilateral triangle where each one is approximately 30 degrees. And something about a grand trine is that they are usually all in one element, unless one of the legs is out of orb. But it's usually all in earth or all in fire. And so they're compatible because of that. They work well together. Yods are considered incompatible because they're in various, I wish I could, can I toggle back and forth to the other one?
No. I think so. Try it.
I don't even see it now.
It's here.
No. Well, it is in this booklet. This is a booklet that I've been working on. I started working on this back in the 90s. This is an early version, but I have Jung's chart in here. So just for the sake of argument. So here's that yod in those 3 planets. This is a second page that tells you in more mathematical terms what the relationships are between all of the planets. So this grid is like a shorthand way of looking at the same information. So here we see he has moon conjunct Pluto. That's kind of striking. Here it is in graphic form at the bottom of the chart. So that was something that really affected him, along with the singleton between Neptune and his sun and that yod. So he grew up feeling really different. He was really different. And he just processed life and information differently, even though he had these the lineage of ministry. They weren't really embracing the mystery. His forebears, his forefathers, they weren't, you know, they were far more patriarchal and into control and I would say the Catholic Church epitomized that. They were more Presbyterian about it. So to get back to now, when I do these, can you see the book now?
Yes.
Okay, and we went to the chart together before? I'm just hoping that we don't have to go through all that rigmarole. So here we'll pick up here. From early childhood on, Jung heard many conversations about religious topics, sermons and theological discussions that utterly fascinated and aggravated him at the same time. He sensed the mental constructions, his father's problems, and the unreality of the way religion was experienced. With Jupiter in a yod and an unaspected Neptune, the two sides of religion are placed at the forefront. Jupiter concerns primarily vision, teachings, and studies. It's more formal. Whereas Neptune much more concerns the unarticulated actuality and experience of the religion, what I would say is the more mystical reality. With Neptune, the lines are blurred and the actual experiencing of oneness comes to the forefront. I would say that's a good summation. In his book, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, Jung presents anecdotes, feelings, and experience that illustrate his yod and duet beautifully, something to that effect. The three outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they're all beyond Saturn, which is the last planet that you can see with the naked eye. So the three outer planets may bring us into contact with another reality beyond the customary three-dimensional world in which we live, and which is so familiar to us. Each of these three outer planets does this in a different way. I have all three in aspect to my sun, so I'm considered to be a very outer planet person. Neptune is strongly connected with the transcendental and experience oneness in diversity, so that existing delineations can no longer be taken for granted. With Neptune, which rules Pisces, by the way, with Neptune, we enter the world of dreams, a world filled with symbols and mysteries. The delineations of time and space are relative for Neptune as well, which is the reason why this planet is always brought into connection with clairvoyance and extrasensory perception. However, blurring these delineations may also bring to the surface general human themes hidden away deep down in our psyches and mix collective psychic material with personal feelings and experiences. And that can be really hard to sort out. Neptune keeps the awareness of other dimensions alive inside us and offers a sensitivity to the mythological and religious, and for everything that has to do with inner images, from fantasy to dream, from fairy tale to vision. It is the effect of our inner nature to which Neptune lends plastic form, while it also makes us sensitive to the living reality of eternal nature. External nature, eternal too. So I hope you like her writing, I really do. Jung gives a number of clear examples of this from his childhood years. From when he was 7 until he was 9, he liked to play with fire, literally, and was around a stone wall. Stretching down from this wall was a hill in which a stone was embedded. This stone stuck up from the ground, and Jung experienced this as his stone. When he was alone, he often went there to sit, and then in his head, a mental game arose, according to a particular pattern, which began by determining that he was sitting on this stone and that he was on top and the stone beneath him. However, according to him, the stone was also able to think I, and to think something along the lines of, I'm lying here on this hill and you are sitting on me. This inevitably led to the question, am I the one who is sitting on the stone, or am I the stone on which he is sitting? I remember having thoughts like this when I was little. I don't know about anybody else. This inevitably led to the question, am I the one sitting? A question that kept confusing Jung and made him doubt and made him uncertain. But a remarkable magnetic force radiated from this thought game, and it fascinated him. Jung was able to sit for hours on the stone under the spell of the riddle it gave me, as he put it. The relationship between psyche and matter, that made me go right back to the double slit experiment. The relationship between the psyche and matter would always intrigue Jung, and his experience with the stone reveals how a deeper philosophical question that doesn't all fit with a boy of that age, according to customary standards, can pop up as a collective theme and turn into an actual personal experience. The blurring of the delineations between Jung and the stone and the confusion regarding his identity form a nice example of the duet between the sun and Neptune. The sun represents the conscious ego, and Neptune is the beginning of the blurring of the boundaries between self and other and any particularity at all. It's the second to last planet, and it's kind of introducing us to merging with the rest of the universe. Another example of the blurring of the delineation, that's another way of saying it, between time and space is Jung's story about the little man and the stone in the pen box. In older days, there was a little wrapped up god, a Telesphorus Eumerian. Did I say that right? I'm just used to reading.
Escalapius.
Escalapius?
Yeah.
Where? Okay. Sometimes beside Escalapius's staff in renditions, who is reading aloud from a scroll. Telesphorus was a spirit who protected convalescents and belongs to the domain of the god. I can't say it. Escalapius, which is the symbol of the Mercury symbol, of the
staff with the two snakes.
The two serpents, and there's one in the dining room. Another example of is Jung's with the little man in the stone. Okay, Telesphorus was often depicted enveloped in a cape with a hood, the clothing of those who were newly convalescent. Jung discovered the existence of this mythological figure only when he had already been an adult for a long time, and the same thing goes for discovering the role of magical stones play in his alchemical studies. So I think I have to turn this page around. He had a little pen box as a boy with a ruler that he carved into a figure that was this figure, and he put a cape on him. He didn't read anything about this. He didn't get it out of anywhere. He didn't learn anything about it at school. It was all on his own. And so somehow the collective level was, kind of, they call it pollution, polluting his consciousness. Somehow it was penetrating into his personality. So in the box, he had the stone that he painted with one color on top and another color below. It was like a simple representation of the conscious and unconscious minds. So these stones are what Jung calls the Chiringa, birthstone to the Australian Aborigines. These are boulders or oblong stones that are carved, decorated, and used as ritual objects. These stones are believed to be child stones, and they believe the souls of children live in these special stones. By rubbing the stone, the soul was supposed to pass over into the womb. The original peoples of Australia and Melanesia believe these Chiringas come forth from their totem forebear, and that they are relics of their forebear's body and activities, and so full of mana. The stones are sacred and kept in special places. So I'm just going to skip a bit here. So he had created this. All this was totally unknown to Jung when he was 10, but unconsciously these old themes must have continued on in him. He describes having a yellow pen box with a little lock. Okay, so it came after. At this age, with a ruler in it. At the end of the ruler, he cut out a small man, about 2.5 inches long, wearing a coat, top hat, and shiny shoes. He colored it black with ink, cut it off his ruler, and placed it in the pen box, where he had made a little bed. With a piece of wool fabric, he made a little cape for the little man. Jung had an oblong, dark rhinestone that he painted with watercolor in a way that created a division between the upper half and the lower half. He placed the stone with the little man, and that was his stone. Jung experienced all of this as a big secret and brought the little man to a forbidden place in the attic of their house. The prohibition concerned the rotten boards, so the spot was pretty dangerous to stand on. He knew for certain that nobody would discover. Did I do it right?
Yeah.
The whole ritual had a healing effect on him. Until then, he had felt incredibly divided and insecure. And placing this box in the attic on the beam supporting the roof gave him a feeling of safety. And his feeling of being split was made way more calm. And occasionally, when he was having a hard time, for whatever reason, he would think of the secret little man in the attic and he would be able to cope again. Now and then he would go to the attic and take up with him little pieces of paper that he had covered with a kind of secret writing. And these were both letters with what Jung wanted to say to the little man, as well as the little man's library. Jung would later could not recall what he wrote the little man. The process of taking the feelings and certainly back on the most essential thing as part of his youth was the secret. He sees making the little man as the first still unconscious childish attempt to find a form of the secret. So Jung later recognizes the little man as Telesphorus, the god who protected convalescents. Jung's health in his younger years was not fantastic. To put it mildly, he was extremely sickly. He was home from school for months at a time. But the burden Jung shouldered during this time, it made the little man, was awareness of the great big world society in which he felt very insecure. He experienced it as a direct threat and didn't know how to deal with it. After the ritual with the little man, things improved considerably, just as if Telesphorus had entered the scene at the moment that Jung's psyche was ready for a change in attitude. Telesphorus was also the symbolic expression of the healing process of that psychic wound. The way Telesphorus was dressed largely agreed with what in olden days had been the custom, without young Carl having even the slightest clue about this. Evidently, something deep and archaic in his unconscious managed to break through, which in the old days had to do with healing, to set into operation a healing process for this 10-year-old as well. So now I'm gonna skip ahead. I'll give you this whole section, we'll email it to you. Now we've got to rotate this again. This is what happens when you're working at the last minute. But I was so happy that I found this. I'm gonna do that again. Because it really shows what we're talking about. It was his own wound. It was his own woundedness that he brought to his work, first as a medical doctor. I mean, first he had to get a medical degree to become a psychiatrist. And then he became far more concerned with people's psyches. And so here she's talking about Neptune and the sun again. And this is the part that I found the most interesting. It often this is him writing. It often seems as there were an impersonal karma within a family, which is passed on from parents to children. It has always seemed to me that I had to answer questions which fate had posed by forefathers and which had not yet been answered, or as if I had to complete or perhaps continue things which remained from previous ages left unfinished. Young Herewith wonders whether these questions have a more personal or a more general collective nature, but has the impression that this latter is at issue. It is true that as long as you don't recognize a general pattern, it will arise as a personal problem. Think of his experiences as a child. To get more examples. His dream and his vision. These were personal battles and secrets for him, but finally they turned out to be archetypal images that embraced issues that are collective in nature. A little further on, he writes that both our soul as well as our body is built up of components that were all already present in our string of forebears. The newness in the individual psyche is an endlessly varied recombination of age-old components. So for me, the most significant part of this is that he was somehow marked, apparently from birth, to struggle with these things as a child, as an individual. Even with all those religious professionals around him, he had nobody to ask about this. The vision that I skipped over as a child, he had a vision of God taking a giant dump on top of the cathedral. And it really affected him. At first, he really tried not to have the vision. He fought it, and then it just surfaced. So he was always having these really powerful religious experiences, which weren't always positive.
I'm sorry I missed a bunch, and I'm sure you wanted to go somewhere with your thought there, Marjorie, but can you tell me where Chiron is in his chart?
Where which is?
Chiron.
Chiron. That's a very good question. It should be in the printout that I did. Chiron is the symbol of the wounded healer. Now, can you guys see this chart?
Yes.
And I didn't have to change view. Okay, I always thought there was a way to do this. There it is. It's at 26 degrees Aries, which is close enough to be conjunct his Neptune in his third house. So Neptune being his mystical streak, is part of his woundedness, which if we survive it, it tends to make us stronger. If it doesn't kill us, the wound makes us stronger, and it becomes a special gift. So I would say it was his mystical awareness that initially kind of set him apart and made him feel alienated and isolated. In the end, he did have a wonderful group of friends and community around him. In his home became this wonderful center and school. But he went through a very long period of feeling completely like a hermit, you know, on earth, surrounded by people that he just had nothing in common with. So the third house, which is very heavily populated in his chart, as we say, that's this house here. That's said to correspond to the left brain intellect. That's your conventional mind. The 12th house is more your intuitive mind. I like the way astrology divides things up like that. So Neptune corresponds to the 12th house and Pisces. Having that down here in the third house, for a lot of people would be kind of a handicap. Because it makes you kind of dreamy and vague. You're too immersed in the oneness to make the proper delineations and differentiations. Life doesn't have the same hard edges for you. And that's in the same house with his moon conjunct Pluto, which is the Pluto is the tip of that yod. So this is a really heavily occupied sector of his psyche and reality. Last time we talked a little bit more about the 7th house, and I would say that's where his connection to clients is, but it's also significant others. And as we said, there's something very unconventional having Uranus so close to the sun there. That's likely to be unconventional and nonconformist and sometimes split. Sometimes people who have that, they can't really relate with all of themselves to just one partner. They have a kind of a split with two different partners. And that's what he seemed to have. So I don't live that way, but I don't feel any need to judge it. I think they all three were involved and, you know, made their decisions accordingly. And I think his wife had enough autonomy to leave if she wanted to.
Want to do anything on Labyrinth now? It's 8.
So unless there are any more questions, this is sort of, I think, as far as we've gotten. I just wanted to share an individual chart with you. And I would say this is why he became interested, was that he needed some kind of an anchor. And astrology helped him orient himself and find which way was up. It's a very complicated chart. He's got planets almost everywhere in it. And these lines show the interactions in mathematical terms that show the relationships of the themes that he's dealing with. So it's not just a sun sign. You can't really describe somebody by saying, oh, well, he's a Leo. That's part of it. You know, that's certainly part of it. But it's really, the sun is just 1/10 of the planets. It gets weight. It's one of the two lights, the sun and moon and the ascendant all get a little bit more weight than the others. But it doesn't discount the totality of the other 9 planets. So if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to take them, or we could just do a little slice of the labyrinth, which is a similar mandala kind of shape. And it's also an archetypal form that is found all over the earth. They seem to be a true example of an archetype because they're present in every culture. But if anybody, I love the questions. If anybody has any more questions, feel free to ask, or you can send them to me by email.
So Jung actually really did study his own chart.
Oh,
He-
yes,
He became really,
yes. He studied a chart for every one of his patients.
interesting.
He didn't talk about it with them. We're actually taught that you shouldn't do it with somebody that you have an ongoing patient practitioner relationship with, because it's too invasive. When somebody's coming to you for therapy, they're unfolding, in their own process, in their own way, at their own time, at their own pace. When somebody comes to you for a reading, it's a really intensive 90-minute session usually that is by definition a boundary invasion. You're invited to do it, but if I work with somebody I know, I don't do it the same way that I do it with a stranger. So he didn't talk about it in great depth. He would make passing comments, but he calculated them and reviewed them for all of his patients more and more over time. And he studied his own, he studied his transits, and there's another thing called progressions, and Bart is starting to look at harmonics, which is another style of progression that I've been doing it for about 35 years now, since I started studying. And for me, it's just endlessly fascinating. I stopped for, I don't know, 5 to 10 years while I was just going through so much hell. And all I could really see, everything else was kind of eclipsed by the Pluto conjunct my moon transit that I was having. And the way I had described that intellectually, kind of abstractly to clients before, was that you feel like you're being rotor-rooted. It's like a rotor-rooter of your psyche. And those were just words to me until I experienced it for myself. It's even more personal than being on your sun, because your moon is your instinctive side and your inner child and your most vulnerable place. It also represents the public and the moon. Pluto represents the collective. It's the farthest planet from the center, and the moon is the most personal. So they're said to be the two most inimical planets. So when they're in aspect to each other, that's why you feel like you're being turned inside out. So that went on for about 10 years for me while I was going through this. Another level of Pluto is, collectively speaking, corruption and like the Third Reich, and that's what I was going through. That's what I was experiencing. And so I saw every level of it. I saw it societally, I saw it in law. I had to learn to teach myself how to essentially practice law to defend myself and my family during this time. And it's actually these two books, the other one by Liz Green, and this woman is really Liz Green's kind of assistant, is helping me, because it is looking at these collective themes. So I think I was one of those people that was kind of marked for a kind of destruction. And I had to learn to move through that death and resurrection. And hopefully I can do something that will be of help to other people going through a similar kind of experience of Pluto represents the underworld, the mafia, the Third Reich, power. It has a lot to do with power. So that was really where I was. And I'm just kind of coming out of it now. And it really nearly killed me. You know, it was wreaking havoc with this inflammatory syndrome, which is anger and rage. You know, it was just unbelievable rage that they were doing this to us, my family, a family of women who were just, you know, really, really marked for destruction and implosion. So I hope I can make something meaningful of it. I've tried to help a lot of other people involved in the same system, but it's just, it's really too dark. I have very deep bonds with the other survivors, but I've seen a lot of people get cancer and die. You know, it kind of comes with the territory. So to end on a lighter note, we could go toward another mandala symbol.
So Marge, quick, so I have, I got interested in astrology years ago, and I've never come close to where you've gone with it. But I have visions. I'm a dreamer, and I just am becoming more and more aware of it just in the last couple of years. You know, I'll have this distinct vision of having seen something in a magazine or in a book, and then I go to look for it and it's not there, and yet it will come to fruition.
Mhm.
And a lot of that is, you know, you guys are really helping me to understand it. So my question is, there's been some really big conjunctions in the last couple of years, and that's something I'm really interested in looking at, is the astrology and the conjunction of big bodies. Is that you might be interested in?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. We were talking today about, you know, potential ways to go forward with it. You don't have to learn all the nitty gritty, but it is possible. You know, or we could do some broad strokes, but it sounds like you've got a strong Neptune. But that's what I would say. And it is imagination and sensitivity, but it's also visions. You know, I was really directed to get out of New York City in the spring of 2001.
I get that. I see that, you know, and that picture, that tarot card was just absolutely amazing. And I know people who were there at the time, and people who were actually took over and stepped up into a leadership position. But you know, you needed to get out of there.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
The person that handles our website for Aleph Talks, who's at our church, was actually working at American Express.
Which I
And
freelance.
the American Express building was right across the street from the two World Trade Center towers, if you're familiar with Manhattan. And she took everything in her desk and emptied it out Friday afternoon and said, "You got to get out of here." She put, you know, black garbage bag together and then left, walked out the door.
Just dragged it.
And everybody thought she was crazy.
They thought she was just having a breakdown. But she was one of the few people that didn't go to work the next day, you know. And you know, and survived. I don't know what was going on for me, but it was just really clear, you know, get out of Dodge and bring your books and bring your cats was the message. So, you know, I don't know why. I felt terrible. I was hysterical when I saw the footage on TV with my family. I had moved to Vermont. Came down here that day, and we were all just glued to the set watching people jump out the windows. And that's when I realized what something was trying to tell me, but it wasn't clear enough what it was. And what would I do anyway? Call up the mayor? You know, it was kind of one of the worst experiences of my life. And I could see the World Trade Center from my living room window in Manhattan. And I freelanced there. I did readings at Windows on the World sometimes. So it was, and I knew people that worked down there. It was terrible. So I don't, I don't know why I got part of the picture and not more. And, why me and not other people, but like this woman who Bart just said does her website, she got a clear message. And everybody was kind of ridiculing her, for a nut. But she's one of the few that survived. So
nothing happens by accident. It's just this group. This everybody in this group has a purpose, and there's a reason that every one of us is here and part of this group.
that feels like it's true, doesn't it? Yeah. We're drawn together, hopefully for some good reason to do something productive. Well, I'd like to end on a lighter note. That was pretty heavy, but we have to talk about the heavy things too. And it was Saturn Pluto that they say was the symbolic level of what was going on with the World Trade Center and back again with the pandemic. And they have one of those recurring cycles. So it's I'm trying to find ways to move through. I just read this. I in all these years, I don't remember reading that in this book, which I bought when it came out like 20 years ago, that Pluto has to do with coping. Somehow I missed that until now. And I feel like one thing I've had to do is learn to cope with the impossible to cope with, but what do you do? So I've just learned to just keep going an inch at a time, a centimeter at a time at times, and just hold on for dear life. Well, Bart wants to end on a different note. So I thought to just, we're not going to do a labyrinth walk this year, most likely. We're still back and forth. If we do, it'll be a small one in a yoga studio. It won't be a big one at the church. This was my labyrinth facilitator trainer, who's a very sweet lady who is a canon. So that's like in the Episcopal Church, it's kind of on the way to being a bishop, I think. And she's seated in the San Francisco Cathedral, the Episcopal Cathedral in San Francisco. And she is the person that really got them to take the chairs off the labyrinth in Chartres Cathedral in Paris and got people making pilgrimages again to it and sharing it as a tool of healing. She learned about it from Jean Houston. Some of you may know about her. She's considered to be part of the human potential movement. And she was leading retreats, and Lauren Artris was one of her people when she was having a dark night of the soul herself and not knowing which way to go forward. So she's done a tremendous amount to bring about what they call the renaissance of the labyrinth in the past 20, 30 years. She's written a lot of really great books on it. And I did a weekend training workshop with her at a retreat. What is it? The Mercy Center in upstate Connecticut, here on the water. And it's just a beautiful retreat center. They are very Christian. I asked them if they would bring Matthew Fox there, and it was, like the sign of the devil, because he was excommunicated, which I just completely wasn't thinking about at all. I just really like him. But so I'd like to share, this is a really short video of what she says about the labyrinth. And what I see them having in common with astrology, you might say, what the hell? They're both spiritual technologies. They're both machines that can help us shift our energy in a new direction. They can help with the turning point. That it's something that you can evoke consciously and on purpose. You don't have to have, a breakdown and rebuild. You can do it gracefully, so to speak. You can facilitate it and work within, there's training wheels. So she's a wonderful facilitator, trainer of facilitators. So she's the woman who, it was right after I was first ordained in 2006. I had started walking them like in the late 90s, but I got my training as part of my priestess training, which is what I was ordained in that tradition of the divine feminine. It was right after that she was coming to Connecticut. It was a fluke, totally a fluke. She came to give me my training here in Connecticut, and I didn't even have to go into the city because I was taking care of my mother at the time. So I was able to get help to come in for her, and I could spend the day up there and commute back for the night. I forget, it was like a 3 or 4 day training that was just wonderful. So this is Lauren Artris, the Episcopal canon of the church in San Francisco.
Get the button down there.
So is this sharing now?
A labyrinth is a walking meditation. It's a path of prayer. It's really a crucible of change. People use it for quieting the mind. They use it when they're going through major transitions. It's a wonderful tool and practice for bereavement.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So there's many uses.
Oh, it's unplugged.
The labyrinth is very important today because it stabilizes our inner world. It orders chaos. And it allows us to really stop, quiet the mind, and be able to then reflect on where we are in the journey in our lives.
You want to try plugging it in?
No.
Usually just to encourage people to quiet down a little bit, and they may have a specific intention of why they're doing the labyrinth walk at that time, or they may not, in that case I say just go in open, just see what happens, but let yourself experience the experience. It's very important that people follow their natural pace and the pace their body wants to go, not the pace that they think they should go. And also to feel free then to move around people. Well, anyone who wants to be able to reflect quietly on their lives, anybody who wants to be able to not use words but find connection to other people, it's wonderful to walk it in a group. People come for all sorts of reasons, stress reduction, to be able to just take time out to be able to figure out and be present with yourself long enough to be able to get an insight of where you are in the journey. There's other reasons too. I mean, certainly people come to Grace Cathedral, many people, especially during our summer months, to simply walk it as a path of prayer. Someone might be trying to solve some kind of issue or in their lives, some kind of challenge. People also use it for health challenges when they're going through medical examinations and all sorts of the terrible challenges that we have going in and out of hospitals, looking at the possibility of different treatments. It's a tool to be able to discern the wisest path. Veritas is a not-for-profit that's dedicated to teach people about walking the labyrinth, about its use as a spiritual practice. And the Chart Labyrinth is indeed my heart song, but it certainly is open to teaching people about other designs as well as other uses.
The name for her organization comes out of Hildegard's work, Veritas. That's her word for it, means like greening, like spiritual blossoming or greening.
Here's a brief history of Labyrinth.
The Labyrinth has a long history dating back several thousand years. This presentation.
Oops, how do we?
The Labyrinth has a long history dating back several thousand years. This presentation will be a brief overview of the various forms the Labyrinth has taken over time. Labyrinth designs have predated religions and can be found on rock formations, metal objects.
Oh, here it is.
Ivory, clay tablets, walls of buildings, and a range of walking labyrinths over time. First, we will understand the difference between a labyrinth and a maze, and then explore the types of labyrinths. Next, we will journey through time and view labyrinths across the world. During our tour, we'll reflect on an ancient Greek myth about Theseus and the Minotaur, and the contemporary use of the labyrinth will be discussed in the video that focuses on labyrinth and mutual aid group work. Labyrinths and mazes. There is a difference between the labyrinth, here we have an example of the Chartres Cathedral labyrinth, and a maze, which is on the right. The labyrinth is a single path, or as they call it, universal path from the entrance to the center, and then the same path one will take back out. But the maze, on the other hand, is a complex puzzle, what they call multicursal, where there could be dead ends and having to return, and one can get lost in a maze, whereas in a labyrinth is a clear path from the entrance to the center and using the same path to exit. And there are different types of labyrinths in terms of the design. This is the more classical or Cretan design. The Chartres Cathedral labyrinth is the one here. And this might be construed as a Roman design in terms of the labyrinth, although there are other types of Roman designs that are square. Next, a few examples of labyrinths from different places. The walking labyrinths are an example. This one is in Sedona, Arizona, at the Lodge at Sedona. This is at a Unitarian church in Sedona. I'm not sure, this is a European lawn labyrinth, a rock labyrinth from Scandinavia, I believe, here. And then we see various kinds. This labyrinth here is kind of a cloth or canvas labyrinth, which is a walking labyrinth that one is portable. This looks like it's a labyrinth on a coin, a Greek coin, which is the oldest perhaps of the ones we're looking at here, although the Arroyo Hondo one in New Mexico is fairly dated as well. That's this one here. This is an older one, much older one. And then the Man in the Maze from Southwest United States is an example. And then this one is from a cathedral in Europe as well. Then over time we find patterns on rocks and other forms of natural features. Then the types of labyrinth we talk about here and in our other videos is there's the walking labyrinth, which are examples here. This one is in Orlando, Florida. I'm not sure where this came from. You'll see that this is kind of a paper labyrinth, and this is made out of stones. These are walking labyrinths. The hands or the finger labyrinth is this is more of a contemporary labyrinth. This is a labyrinth etched on a rock that probably was not large enough for one to walk with their fingers, but this is an old labyrinth, many hundreds of years old. Perhaps not a finger labyrinth, but to get you an idea of what designs, there's many designs that you'll find on various.
They're
choices
often
you
at
have
the
to walk
entrances
the
of
labyrinth,
caves
select what you find more comfortable.
that they
Next week
are felt to be
is,
protective of the
a
threshold.
bracelet here from Ukraine dating back to 13,000 BCE. The one etched in stone here is probably between the Paleolithic and Neolithic. It's difficult to get a fix on exactly what the years were, or the ranges of years for these two periods. But the Paleolithic is the older period, which would be known as the Stone Age, where most things would be found in terms of stone, etchings on bones, perhaps used with flint. And then there are many rock etchings and pottery that come later, which would be in the Neolithic period. Again, you still have stone and art similar, and then this pylos grease etched into some kind of clay material that would be from the Bronze Age, perhaps, or later. Next, we find a 5,000-year-old, what appears to be a walking labyrinth in Russia. This is an interesting labyrinth in that an anthropologist in the 1970s suggested that there's 30 of these labyrinths in this area, which makes it a quite high concentration at 5,000 years. For 5,000 years ago, someone suggested that these may have been used to trap fish because the water level was allegedly much higher at the time. However, later research has debunked that idea, and perhaps these look more like they were walking labyrinths from what one can see. But an interesting kind of design. Those were in Russia, and there were 30 along that coastline. It's just off the shore there. Then the 15th Circuit Labyrinth here would be found in Sweden, Finland, and Estonia, which were used by fishermen who walked the labyrinths before going out to fish because they believed the symbols would protect them, ensuring wind and a good catch. There's a more full-size labyrinth in Finland and Estonia than anywhere else in the world. There are more of these 15 circuit labyrinths in that area. Here's kind of a seed cut of what that might look like. Some were built by the Vikings. However, most of them were built by fishermen from around 1500 to 1900 CE. Again, walking the labyrinth before going off to the sea was seen as a propitious kind of behavior. This 15th Circuit Labyrinth was found in Tibble, Sweden. It's approximately 2,000 plus years old. There's another design of the 15th Circuit, which is a rather large labyrinth with which to negotiate. This looks like it may have been a stone pattern, which was actually laid on the ground and walked by individuals. Next slide looks at the known legend of the Minotaur, which involves a labyrinth that is really a maze from the information shared in the myth. However, it's a story about Queen Pasiphae, who slept with a bull sent by Zeus and gave birth to the Minotaur, which was a half man and half a bull figure, as you see back here. King Minos was embarrassed and had a labyrinth built in the palace at Knossos, and Minos required that 7 men and women be selected each year to try to kill the Minotaur. Theseus, who we see here, decided to be one of the 7 and promised his father that he would kill the Minotaur. Theseus met Princess Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos, and she fell in love with him. To help him, she gave him a thread and told him to unravel it as he went through the labyrinth. That way, he would be able to find his way out after killing the monster. Theseus followed the thread out of the labyrinth, having killed the Minotaur, and celebrated with Ariadne. This is a ancient myth which is still resonates with people today. The Nazca lines in Peru, which people are somewhat familiar with, can be seen from the sky. These are what the designs look like over that area. And you'll see here a labyrinthine design. This isn't a labyrinth, but it's labyrinth-like. These are 1,500 years old, where people would walk in, around, and circle. Then there's the large bird, and then there's these ones with labyrinthine-like tails, which you will see here. These were allegedly some of the more recent history walking labyrinths, although others predate them by many years. Here we have a series of old labyrinths. India, 250 BCE, again before the Christian era, and in Goa there's like rock labyrinths. There's this one. These are kind of classical-like designs. Then there's a Roman labyrinth here as an example that was built in 165 years, again BCE, and then the 1300s in the Christian era, the Shark Cathedral labyrinth, which was constructed perhaps about well over 100 years ago. And so these are some other kinds of designs. As I said, we're kind of looking at designs over time and various types. The hedge labyrinth comes in many designs and approaches. This is a this looks like a 15-circuit one here. And then we have a lawn design here. And then this very large labyrinth, it's a hedge labyrinth in this area. Some designs show up around that time in later Europe as well: Russia, Middle East, North Africa, Turkey, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Southeast Asia, and North America, among certain tribes as well, after the European arrival in the United States and the Western world. And then the last slide here, there are many walking labyrinths that we find around the world. And the ones here, there's one in Tucson, Arizona, another in that general area of the United States. And this is a European labyrinth, which is set up with lights for a night experience. This video has been only a small sampling of many forms and places where labyrinths or labyrinth-like objects have been found. There is a great variety of shapes, places, purposes for using the labyrinth. And I just wanted to provide a brief introduction to give you a flavor of the fact that labyrinths go back as far as the Paleolithic period. And there have been many religiously oriented labyrinths in terms of Christianity and other religions in more recent times. I wanted to share the two encyclopedic resources, which I think are the finest I've crossed paths with, are Curran's Through the Labyrinth, Designs, Meanings Over 5,000 Years, and Labyrinths, Mazes, and Mazes, A Complete Guide by Sauer. These are really outstanding, and I highly recommend them for people wanting to do further research. Also, if you want to purchase labyrinths, this is a place where I tend to buy most of what I buy from vendors. There are walking labyrinths, finger labyrinths. He has canvas labyrinths he sells so that people can walk on, and a myriad of finger labyrinths and labyrinth-like objects. I hope you found this enough to interest you to further research labyrinths and their types and uses. Thank you.
Okay, so there we have it. It is now witching hour.
Witches are out.
Well,
We're witches, aren't we?
yeah, this is our Coven, whatever. So anyway, next time is our last class. So that'll be, I guess, 35 of these things now since October, just like last year. And then we'll look at what we can do for the summer. If you've got something you want to do, just yell and we'll circulate it for comment to see what people want to do. Right now, we've got the Book of Job and the Jung's answer to that, and also Ettinger's critique of what Jung wrote and so forth. So we can spend the summer on that if you want, or if you have something else you want to do, we'll go do it.
I'd also like,
Basic astrology.
Come again?
Some basic astrology.
Basic astrology.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that would be really good.
Kind of a primer to astrology. I'd be interested in that too.
Are you interested in kind of an overview or more of the nuts and bolts of how it works and how to do it?
Yeah, how it works, like there's so many componentry to, there's so many components that it would be really great to just like understand all the different layers of it, and then the different symbol tables and then, you know, the, like today was the yod as an example, but all the different variants that way. It'd be, I think, I'd love that.
Sure, we talked about
Yeah, just so that we understand, like, what I would start with some of the basics, like what are the planets and what do each one of them kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say, you know, obviously you can go into, you know, days or weeks on each one of them, but something that just gives a snapshot of what they are. And so that when somebody says yod, you know, this yod thing, at least there's a kind of a general understanding comes to our head, or we understand what the planets and what the signs kind of mean, or how they're connected, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I'd agree.
I have a booklet that I created years ago to teach with, and I've just been dusting it off as I get into my old computer that we're resurrecting. And it gives you keywords so that you can create your own interpretations.
That'd be very interesting.
Mm.
You have to do a certain amount of memorization, but something that I came up with or downloaded that, you know, was a gift from above, a way to do it. I'm going to just do a demonstration. Well, here's a list of the keywords.
Okay,
Backwards.
yeah,
So here we have them for a planet is Pluto, the corresponding sign is Scorpio, and this corresponding house is the 8th house.
mhm.
So
But we'll send that out.
we have sent out a sample of that. So what you would do to learn, what I came up with a fun way to learn is you can use these dice as an oracle. You ask a question. So I'll say, what do we need to know about doing this class? You know, what do we need to know about doing this class together? So then you do the dice this way. They're 12-sided dice. Can you see them?
Mhm.
So then you read them. You start with a planet and a sign and a house. So we got the planet Neptune in the sign of Cancer in the 12th house. So then you would create an interpretation using your keywords here. And you actually cut those out into strips so you can mix and match them. And so it's a way of learning divination at the same time as learning your building blocks, your vocabulary.
Mm.
And how many weeks would you do that?
I usually did that for 6 weeks.
So then we could still do something else.
Well, there's other things I was thinking of covering with this. So there is a Hindu mythology, astrology, okay, which is not this Western. And there's also just what we're kind of walking around here is what's called harmonic analysis. Okay, so if you've ever dealt with anything such as you know what in music, Fourier looked at weighted sums of sines and cosines, and you could construct, if you had enough of these all together, you could construct any arbitrary thing that you were looking for. But if you just step back and look at it, there might be only a few key harmonics that are really driving everything, and the others are not really that important. As an
Or is that like an FFT?
Yeah, and a fast Fourier transform is the discrete time version of that. Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Wow.
The thing I was talking about was a continuous time, but but there's a lot of things that go with harmonic analysis. Okay, is all I'd say. So we would have more than enough to fill up, a chunk of the summer. But I probably people want to go take some time off, having been cooped up for COVID, and they want some holidays. So I would think,
Well, you can take us with you.
yeah.
So on that note, I'd like to talk about possibly everybody coming to New London for a retreat, and we could have a labyrinth. One of the churches that's within a couple blocks of downtown would be a place, and have a labyrinth and a weekend with compassionate communication.
Sure.
And
Wow.
we could,
There's also a great lobster place in Noang called Abbott's.
yes,
Your classic New England, lobster and clam chowder and cheesecake place.
Ah. Had cheesecake.
It's looking right at Mystic. So
Bruce, that's a little far for you.
I could probably get you a place to stay at Voluntown Peace Trust, which is about a half an hour from New London, so it wouldn't be quite as arduous as coming from where you are.
Well, let's keep
Wait,
talking.
something to think about, within, 6-8 weeks out.
right. Okay, I'll put together an email and start circulating it, and we'll see what people have to say about doing so. Okay.
Well, thank you for your,
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Marjorie.
thank you, guys.
Good night.
All right.
I'm sorry my camera keeps going out. I don't know why. It's a ghost or something. I can't explain it. Bye, everybody.
Okay. Bye bye. Have a
Bye.
good weekend.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Blessings to you all.